You look tired, like my husband before he left. The words hit Marcus Chen like a freight train. He'd been staring out the rain-streaked window of Pearl's Café for the past hour, watching the Seattle streets blur into watercolor memories. The coffee in front of him had gone cold twice. Linda, the owner, had stopped asking if he wanted a refill. But this voice, soft, knowing, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the same exhaustion in another man's eyes, made him turn. She was young, maybe early 30s. Dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes that had seen too much, too soon. She stood there holding a tray with a fresh cup of coffee and what looked like homemade apple pie. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice catching. I shouldn't have said that. You reminded me of someone." Marcus should have turned back to his window. Should have given her the polite smile he'd perfected over 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Instead, he heard himself say, "Did he come back?" Her name was Emma Lawson, and she'd been working at Pearl's Café for 8 months. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Marcus would see her wiping down tables, refilling sugar containers, always moving like she was trying to outrun her thoughts. They'd never spoken before, not really. Just the occasional thank you when she brought his order. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the storm outside. Maybe it was the fact that Marcus had just signed the papers that would finalize the sale of his company, the thing he'd poured 15 years of his life into. "He didn't," Emma said quietly, sliding into the booth across from him without asking permission. "My husband, I mean. He left 3 years ago. Car accident on I-5. Black ice." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. He'd lost people too. Just not to death. He'd lost them to ambition, to 70-hour work weeks, to the belief that success would fill the hollowness inside. "Don't be," Emma said, pushing the pie toward him. "You didn't know him, but you look like you're carrying the same weight he was." Right before the end, David started coming home later and later. He'd sit in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes before coming inside. When I asked him what was wrong, he'd say, "Nothing, just tired." Marcus felt his throat tighten. How many times had he sat in his Tesla in the underground parking garage, unable to face going up to his empty penthouse? "That's why I said something," Emma continued. "I saw you through the window last week. You were just sitting, staring. And tonight, the same thing. I thought, maybe if someone had said something to David. Maybe if someone had seen him. Really seen him. Maybe." She trailed off, her eyes glistening. They talked for 3 hours that night. About loss. About regret. About the weight of trying to hold everything together when you're falling. Apart inside, Marcus told her about the company, Chen Technologies, how he'd built it from nothing in his cramped studio apartment, how he'd sacrificed relationships, health, sleep, how his college sweetheart, Rachel, had left him 2 years ago because she said he'd become a ghost who occasionally remembered to eat, how he'd just sold it all for $340 million. "Congratulations," Emma said, her tone making it a question. "That's what everyone keeps saying," Marcus replied. "My lawyers popped champagne, my investors are thrilled. But all I keep thinking is, what was it for? I'm 42 years old. I have more money than I'll ever spend. No family, no real friends. Just a calendar full of meetings with financial advisors." Emma nodded slowly. David was a public defender. He worked insane hours for terrible pay. He'd come home stressed, exhausted, but he believed in what he did. Then the system started breaking him down. Too many cases. Too many people. He couldn't save. He started drinking. Just a little at first. Then more. "The night he died," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "we'd had a fight. I told him he needed to quit, that the job was killing him. He said I didn't understand. that those people needed him. He stormed out. 3 hours later, the police were at my door. Marcus started coming to the cafe every evening. At first, he told himself it was convenient. Close to his condo. Good coffee. Quiet. But he knew the truth. He was coming to see Emma. Their conversations became the highlight of his days. She'd take her break and slide into his booth, and they'd talk about everything and nothing. Books, movies, the absurdity of Seattle weather, their shared love of terrible 90s sitcoms. Emma told him about her life after David's death, the crushing weight of grief, the guilt, the life insurance money that felt like blood money, how she'd moved from their house in Bellevue to a small apartment in Capitol Hill because she couldn't stand the memories. "I keep the money in an account I never touch," she admitted one evening. "I can't spend it. It feels wrong, like profiting from his death." Marcus understood that feeling. His wealth felt the same way. Profit from sacrificing his humanity. "What would you do if you could do anything?" he asked her. Emma's eyes lit up for the first time since he'd met her. "There's this community center in Beacon Hill. Serves immigrant families, low-income kids. They're about to lose their lease. I keep thinking, with David's insurance money, I could save it. But then I think, what if that's not what he'd want? What if I fail? What if you succeed?" Marcus interrupted. "What if you turn his death into something that helps hundreds of people?" 3 weeks into their friendship, Emma showed up to work with red-rimmed eyes. Marcus knew immediately something was wrong. "I got a letter. Today," she said, her hands shaking as she poured his coffee. "From David's old firm. Apparently, there's some irregularity with his case files from before he died. They want to meet with me." Marcus's business instincts kicked in immediately. "What kind of irregularity?" They wouldn't say over the phone, but they sounded serious. "Want me to come with you?" The words were out before he could stop them. Emma looked at him, surprised. "You'd do that?" "I've sat through more legal meetings than I can count," Marcus said. "And whatever this is, you shouldn't face it alone." The meeting at David's old law firm changed everything. The senior partner, a stern woman named Patricia Holloway, laid out a stack of files on the conference room table. Marcus watched as Emma's face went from confused to horrified. "We've discovered that in the 6 months before his death, David was investigating something he wasn't supposed to," Patricia said. "He'd been assigned a case, routine assault defense, but he started digging into the plaintiff's background and found connections to a construction company called North Point Development." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He knew that name. David discovered that North Point was bribing city officials to fast-track permits. Patricia continued, "Cutting corners on safety regulations. One of their buildings collapsed 2 years ago, killed 4 people. David had evidence that could have brought down the entire company and half the city council." "Why didn't he come forward?" Emma whispered. Patricia's expression softened. "He tried. He went to the DA's office 3 weeks before he died. They told him the case was too politically sensitive, that he should drop it. 2 weeks later, he received the first death threat." The room spun. Emma gripped the table. "Death threat? David never? He never told me about any death threat." "There were 5 total," Patricia said, sliding over printed emails. Each one more explicit. The last one came the day before his accident. "Accident," Marcus said, his voice hard. "You don't think it was an accident, do you?" Patricia met his eyes. "The police report says black ice, but David's car was inspected after the crash. The brake lines showed signs of tampering. The case was closed anyway. Insufficient evidence." Emma didn't speak for the entire drive back to the cafe. Marcus didn't push. He just drove, his mind racing. When they pulled up outside, she finally turned to him. "They killed him. Someone murdered my husband, and everyone just looked the other way." "I'm so sorry," Marcus said. "I spent 3 years blaming myself." Emma said, tears streaming down her face. 3 years thinking if I'd just been more supportive, if I hadn't fought with him that night, if I'd been a better wife. This wasn't your fault, Marcus said firmly. None of this was your fault. But what do I do now? Emma asked. Patricia said the case is cold. The statute of limitations on most of the corruption charges has passed. North Point is bigger than ever. They just broke ground on a new high-rise in South Lake Union. Marcus felt something shift inside him. For the first time in 2 years, he felt purpose. I know North Point, he said slowly. Chen Technologies provided their security systems. I have access to things. Records, communications logs. Emma stared at him. You're talking about corporate espionage. I'm talking about justice, Marcus corrected. David tried to do this the right way. They killed him for it. Maybe it's time someone tried the wrong way. What started as a simple investigation became an obsession. Marcus used his tech expertise and connections. Emma used David's old files and her own determination. Together, they began piecing together a case that would make North Point's previous crimes look like parking violations. They worked late into the night at Marcus's condo, spread out across his living room floor with documents and laptops. They discovered that the corruption went deeper than anyone knew. North Point wasn't just bribing city officials. They were running a money laundering operation through construction projects, with ties to organized crime. And somewhere along the way, between the evidence gathering and the late-night coffee runs and the shared determination to honor David's memory, Marcus and Emma fell in love. It happened quietly. A hand held a moment too long when passing a document. Eyes meeting across the table and holding. The way Marcus started making sure Emma ate during their long research sessions. The way Emma started touching his shoulder when she walked by, grounding him when he got too intense. The night they finally had enough evidence to go public, Emma kissed him. They were standing on his balcony, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The same view Marcus had stared at numbly for 2 years. But tonight, it looked different. Tonight, it looked like possibility. I need to tell you something, Emma said. I think David would have liked you. Marcus turned to her, surprised. We've never really talked about him since we started this. I know, Emma said. I think I was scared that if I acknowledged what I was feeling for you, it would mean betraying him. But I realized something tonight. David spent his life fighting for justice. He died trying to expose the truth. And now you're helping me finish what he started. There's no betrayal in that. There's honor. I'm falling in love with you, Marcus said. The words were out before he could stop them, but he didn't want to. I know the timing is complicated and maybe it's too soon, but Emma kissed him. It was soft and desperate and full of everything they'd both been holding back. It's not too soon, she whispered. It's exactly the right time. They released the evidence through multiple channels simultaneously: major news outlets, federal prosecutors, social media. The story exploded overnight. North Point's CEO was arrested. 7 city council members resigned. The DA's office announced a special task force to investigate David's death. Marcus and Emma watched it unfold on the news from his living room, her head on his shoulder. We did it, she said softly. David's name will be cleared. He was a hero, Marcus said. Now everyone will know. 6 months later, Marcus stood outside the newly renovated Beacon Hill Community Center. The sign above the door read, "The David Lawson Memorial Center." Emma had used the life insurance money, combined with Marcus's donation, to not only save the center but expand it. It now offered legal aid, job training, after-school programs, and counseling services. David would have loved this, Patricia Holloway said, standing beside them at the opening ceremony. He always believed in giving back to the community. Emma smiled, tears in her eyes, her hand intertwined with Marcus's. I spent so long carrying guilt, but this, helping people in his name, it doesn't erase the loss, but it gives it meaning. Marcus squeezed her hand. He thought about that rainy night at the cafe window, how lost he'd been, how empty his success had felt. You know what's funny? He said to Emma. I spent 15 years building a company I thought would give my life purpose, but I was just existing. It took losing everything and finding you to actually start living. We found each other, Emma corrected. Two lost people, both looking for a reason to keep going. 1 year after they released the evidence, Marcus and Emma got married in a small ceremony at Pearl's Café. Linda, the owner, catered. Patricia Holloway officiated. The community center kids made decorations. It wasn't the glamorous life Marcus had once imagined for himself, but it was real. It was meaningful. Emma still worked at the cafe 2 days a week. She said it kept her grounded. Marcus had started a new company. This one focused on creating affordable technology for nonprofits and community organizations. They'd bought a modest house in Beacon Hill, walking distance from the community center. On weekends, they volunteered together, teaching kids coding and life skills. And every Tuesday evening, they'd go to Pearl's Cafe, sit in the same booth where they'd first really talked, and remember how darkness had brought them together, but love had brought them home. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Marcus's loneliness and Emma's grief had collided on a rainy Seattle night, and from that collision came purpose, justice, and love. David Lawson's death hadn't been in vain. His fight for justice had continued through the two people who loved him, one who'd lost him, and one who never knew him but honored his memory anyway. And Marcus Chen, the lonely CEO who'd had everything and nothing, finally understood what success really meant. It wasn't money or power or recognition. It was sitting across from someone you love, knowing you'd both survived the darkness and chosen to build something beautiful in the light. You look tired, Emma had said that first night. She'd been right. He had been tired. Tired of pretending, tired of being alone, tired of a life that looked perfect but felt empty. But he wasn't tired anymore. He was finally, beautifully awake. If you've experienced loss, if you've felt the weight of loneliness, if you've questioned whether your pain will ever serve a purpose, this story is for you. Sometimes our greatest struggles lead us to our greatest strengths. Sometimes the people we meet in our darkest moments become the light that guides us home. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, you're never as alone as you think you are.